So good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation on AISH benefits, the disability tax benefit, the new Canada Disability Benefit, and the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, ADAP. And so, you know, when I was talking to Gordon and we booked this time way back in July, we didn't think it was going to be plus 28 and a beautiful fall evening, so I apologize about that. AISH and these disability benefit programs are clearly a relevant topic to discuss for people associated with FAIM, especially in the light of the recent changes to AISH, ADAP, and the new Canada Disability Benefit. There's been a lot of information out there about these topics in the last couple of months. And I can see by looking at the group here that there are many of you family members of people we support, and there's a lot of employees of FAIM here as well. We all want to understand these benefits. So we're fortunate tonight to have with us two individuals who possess relevant knowledge in this area. They both have made a career providing knowledge, guidance, and information to people who are supporting adults with developmental disabilities, as well as raising their own family. I've asked around my colleagues in the disability sector, other executive directors, and our two speakers are certainly well known and respected for their abilities in the area of information sharing, advocacy towards people with developmental disabilities. I know that you will find tonight's presentation enjoyable and informative. Please join me in welcoming Gordon Vanderleek and Annie Vanderleek.
Well, thank you, and it's a delight certainly to be here. I'll look over here and pay special tribute to the people that are online. We are live streaming, which is a little bit different, Jerry, right, than from the last time we did this. So you're keeping up with the tech, and that's good. So welcome to the people that are watching online, or certainly who are watching the replay of this. By way of introductory comments, I guess that does impact what I might say at the beginning, which I usually say, hey, this is a safe place. What's said in the room stays in the room, right? But we can't say that now because whatever you say is out on the internet. So just be mindful, and let me say this. It may be that your personal situation, if you have a question, please ask it. But if it involves a lot of personal detail about your family, maybe come and talk to me afterwards, or let's have a coffee and let's talk about your situation. Just given the nature of wanting to get the information to as many people as possible, we're taking advantage of the internet, but that has its limitations, and we want to keep your information obviously private. And if there's consultation required, or how does this all apply to me, let's have those one-on-one chats on that as well. So. Getting into the talk, I'm going to be covering the Canada Disability. So the topics we were asked to talk about today, which are timely and in the news, and I'm sure you have lots of questions, are on the Canada Disability Benefit, AISH, and the new ADAP program. And I got at the end just kind of a catch-all of maybe some other things that if you have a child with a long-term disability, some other planning things you might consider, although that's kind of a tag in at the end, and it might raise some other questions. If we have time, we can get into that, but certainly the focus is going to be on these two topics, the Canada Disability Benefit, AISH and ADAP. So in a way, I've kind of lumped the three together there, or the two together, AISH and ADAP, but we'll have them as separate segments. What I might suggest is I love taking questions, and I'm here to answer your questions. I mean, think of this. This is like a couple of hours of free legal advice, and my invoice goes to Jerry. So it's all good, right? You get free legal advice on this. And with that being said, if you have a question on the Canada Disability Benefit, then let's take it when we're talking about it. If you go, well, I got lots of questions about ADAP, know we're getting to that, and that's coming at the end. And then we'll kind of get through the material, then we'll try to take questions on that. So we're giving answers that are relevant if you know, just in terms of organizing our time together. So with that, why don't we jump in and get into it. You know what, one more preliminary comment, I guess, before we get in here. That there's some things we don't know about this whole area, but when the government is involved, very typically, there's a lot we don't know. And especially in this case, relating to ADAP, which is a huge change. You know, the more I'm learning about it and investigating this, the issues under ADAP are forthcoming. And we don't have legislation yet. So the theme of tonight would be, well, here's what we know, and here's what we don't know, but stay tuned. But I'm hoping that this sort of session is instructive for giving a bit of groundwork for what we can anticipate, but it also gives, as parents of children with long-term disabilities, or as caregivers and family members, we also have an opportunity to advocate and hopefully influence the government with regard to some of these proposed changes. So with that being said, a bit of the theme is, well, this is what we know, but we don't have the details, particularly with ADAP, and we'll get into the details of that when we chat about that. Okay, Canada Disability Benefits. The key thing to remember here, and it does sort of tie in we'll talk in a bit about the implication with AISH, but already last year in 2024, right, the federal government, this is a federal program, has said we want to give Canadians with a long-term disability some support. And they were talking about, and advocacy groups were pushing for kind of some additional income coming from the federal government, knowing we have in the various provinces, there's programs that provide support for those that can't support themselves. In Alberta, that's AISH. But this is a federal initiative, almost saying, okay, we don't want people living in poverty, we want to provide some assistance, and a lot of hope attached to this new program that was coming out, and that's the Canada Disability Benefit. Now, the key thing to remember is you have to make an application, and we're going to, there's a couple of criteria here to begin with to say who would be eligible for that. And the key one, the one that I list first, is that the person must be eligible for the disability tax credit. Now, you may have heard about that in the context of AISH sending letters to you. Oh, by the way, you need to apply for this, and if you haven't applied, and one of the criteria is the disability tax credit, then, well, you got to apply for that too, which makes sense, right? Because you don't get the CDB until you have the DTC. Lots of acronyms in this world in dealing with the government, so for brevity, we'll sort of refer to disability tax credit as DTC, and CDB for the Canada Disability Benefit on that. So it is, even if we sort of forget about AISH for a moment, and we're going to park that because we're going to cover that in a second, we have this program, but you have to make an application. It's online, and or you can fill out the paperwork and send that in, right? For a number of our kids, as Jerry was saying, we are parents of children with long-term disability, and we had to do this for some of our kids, right? Not all of them are on the disability tax credit, but those that are, we had to look at that. So the key thing would be, is your child, the analysis is your child eligible for the disability tax credit? And if the answer is they have it, then you can make this application. And that will get you the $200 a month that this program is. We'll talk about the details of that in a second. It's obviously between the ages of 18 and 64. At 65, you move over to the federal disability program, or we all are going to move over to the CPP and the OAS program at age 65. And you have to have filed tax returns, because of course they're going to look at some income, do some income verification and analysis of what you might be entitled to based on the income that you have. So they want to see your tax returns and see those T4 slips being recorded. So if you have a child that hasn't filed, and you're in the process of going through to get the disability tax credit, all right, hire an accountant or get those forms, get those T1 returns and get them filed, knowing that's going to be a criteria. But the key one obviously would be the disability tax credit on that. If you don't qualify, your kid does not qualify for the disability tax credit, you don't get the CDB, right? As simple as that. Which is interesting as a bit of a side, but I'll use this as an opportunity for a bit of a soapbox to say, I would hope over time that the federal government does continue enhancements of the disability tax credit program. Because it's fair to say there are quite a few Canadians who struggle and have a hard time sort of doing daily tasks and living in our society that have these struggles, but they don't qualify for the disability tax credit. So it is, yeah, I think the last stat I heard, there was like 110,000 Canadians that have a disability but don't qualify for the DTC, right? So there's a whole other issue, is that the right test? With that being said, it's the rule. It's typically what the federal government points to in terms of eligibility for their programs. So the other, you just have to go through and try to get it qualified. And Annie is going to talk a little bit about some of the process and can field questions about that whole process on the disability tax credit, so we can touch a little bit on that as well. So as I indicated, the benefit that's there is the $200 a month. They do have some income exemptions, and I've put that here. We did the handouts as well, so you don't have to take copious notes. I should say, if those that give advice about how to do PowerPoints, they would say, well, don't do a PowerPoint like Vanderleaf Law does a PowerPoint, because there's just lots of words, right? But I did that purposely, and especially when we get to the ADAP stuff, so that you have a resource to take away from you, and you can read it after today. So apologies for the small print. If we need to reproduce that in bigger size, then Jerry and his team have that where we can reproduce the handout. So we have the exemptions of $10,000 per year of employment income for a single, 14 for a couple. See where I said they need to look at the tax return, because they're going to plug that into the computer and generate, well, what are you entitled to? And then the income thresholds of $23,000 a year and $32,500 for a couple. And if you're above that, then there's reductions up to 20% above the threshold. So it's an income-based test. In other words, they're targeting this $200 a month for people, I guess in their estimation, who really need it. And it could be that if you make too much money in their estimation, well, then you don't get it because you don't need it. So it sort of makes sense. That's the program that's in place. Again, just by way of commentary and understanding the history of the Canada Disability Benefit, there was kind of a collective, really, when this first was announced, of going, that's it? Like, there was all this pomp and ceremony about how the federal government is going to look after disabled Canadians, and it's like, all right, $200 a month, how far does that go, right? Whether it's Okotoks or Calgary or Edmonton or whereas, I mean, $200 a month, I guess, is better than nothing, but it doesn't go very far. And we're going to see, of course, in Alberta, salt on the wounds that it's only this. They're going to take it away from your kid, right? And by the way, when I say, I mean, typically when we deal with this, the context, I guess I'm using by way of an example, is a parent of a disabled child, so I'll say child or kid or something in the reference, but it could be a sibling, it could be a grandparent or grandchild or somebody else that this is applicable. So when I say children, apply it in the context to your family situation. We'll just use that for ease of reference. So with regard to this situation, we certainly do see that while you can say there's a lot of unique things about living in Alberta, one of the unique things is that the provincial government is the only government or territory in this fine confederation that has made this Canada Disability Benefit, this $200 a month, to be non-exempt. They were being lobbied to make it exempt. And this is in relation to AISH. So we'll see a little bit later when we get into the discussion of AISH, is we always look from an asset perspective, an income perspective of what's exempt, what's non-exempt, right? It's in one of those two categories. So if it's exempt, then it has no impact on AISH, right? For example, we'll see a little bit later on under AISH that you can earn a certain amount of income, you can work and earn a certain amount of income, and it doesn't count, it doesn't claw back your AISH benefit. But if you make too much, it does claw back, right? So this is where every other province and territory, without exception, has said, it's okay, you can keep the $200. And in Alberta, they took the policy position of saying, we'll take that, thank you very much, right? Which I've certainly, I've posted online, so I can say it here. I think that's abhorrent. Call me biased. We have kids with long-term disabilities. They could really use the money. We're living in inflationary times, and they're, you could argue they're not even at the poverty line or below it. As it stands, it's kind of a subsistence living. It's not like anybody's, getting rich off of AISH. They need the money, and they're taking it back. I've been struggling to figure out why this is the case, to try to explain it to you. At first, one explanation may be the federal government just simply wants to balance their budget. I think they're projected to run another deficit in the current fiscal or upcoming fiscal period. And so, okay, I get that. Governments have to do a lot of things and are responsible for a lot of things and have a duty to the taxpayers. We're all taxpayers, and we don't want to pay more taxes than we have to. And so they got to be fiscally prudent and balance the budget. That resonates in Alberta for the most part, right? So I thought, well, that's the way they're doing it. But can you please just come out and say that then, right? As opposed to all this other stuff that the marketing department, I think, or the spin doctors are saying. Again, forgive the, strains of cynicism in the presentation. But, that was sort of one explanation for, why are they taking it from the most vulnerable in the province? That doesn't, I just have a hard time wrapping my head around that. With that being said, more recently, it was just in the past week that I did see a social media post that was summarizing the discussions, the Q&A that Premier Smith had on a talk-in show or radio talk show. And one of the questions that was proposed was, well, why are you doing this, right? And her answer, so we take it at face value, which I thought is interesting. It's maybe another explanation. It doesn't make it less abhorrent in my view, but maybe explains why the government is doing it. Is they go, we know that lots of people move to Alberta because Alberta has better benefits than other provinces, which is in fact a true statement. And this is leveling the playing field and making us closer to every other province, so this is going to discourage people from moving to Alberta. I thought, oh, okay, that's a bit of an interesting twist on why are you doing this. And I want to get into an argument with Premier Smith about the logic of that, but I put it out there for what we know. They certainly have said that even with ADAP, and we're listening to the disability community and we're doing this for the disability community. Well, this is not for the disability community. Show me a parent that's going to put their hand up and say, yes, please take that $200. I'm happy about that, right? I mean, I haven't met one yet. I'm not happy about it. Our kids could use this. And what we're now, I guess the theme for the Canada Disability Benefit is, this is something that Annie was doing for our kids. I'm good at delegating that task, and I said, hey, you do this, right? You apply. Our kids, they have the disability tax credit, but they, we said you need to go through this programming, right? So we got some assistance, we pulled it all together and spent a bunch of time pulling that together. But it's a whole pile of work for, in my example, the parent of a special needs child for no benefit for that kid. I don't mind working hard if it benefits my children. That's why we're parents, and we do that. That's natural, right? We do that. I get a little frustrated when you're going, I'm doing a lot of work for you, province of Alberta. So with that being said, it's not pleasant, and I feel like this is a presentation where I'm not the bearer of good news in that, but try as best we can to explain it and just know what it is. So the advice we've been giving to clients is, even before the letters went out and that September 5th deadline was out there, which has already come and gone, is that you just need to do it to protect any future clawback. Earlier in the summer, it was like, well, are they really going to do that? And then they sent out the letters going, yeah, we're really going to do that. To say, well, no, you have to do all this work for us. And we would like that $200 because we want to stoke our coffers with a few $1 million. Again, pardon the cynicism. And And at that point, then you're going to go, okay, I'm doing all this and my kid's not going to benefit, right? And I think it happened even this morning that I think, Annie, the first check came in, right, for that. We got it in the mail. I picked it out of the mail this morning, and we did the, take the picture, put it in the bank, stick it in the kid's bank account, and go, well, that's just going to go away, right, because it's going to be a clawback. So the themes here, and Annie will sort of get into that when we talk a little bit about the AISH rules, is if you don't do it, what seems to be very clear is that they will claw back that $200 if you're not making an effort to go get it. So the government has now taken, for the 77,000 people that are on AISH, said, well, go out and do a bunch of work for us, right? You've got to do this application process and access the Canada Disability Benefit. Earlier, like over the summer months, a lot of parents were saying, well, why would I do this if my kid's not going to benefit? And it was like, well, to avoid the risk of a clawback. Well, now they seem to be pretty, if you take them at face value, there will be a clawback, right? With that being said, and that's a little bit of the theme coming up when we talk about AISH, a few slides from now but you got to communicate, right? You need to take some actions to avoid the clawback, or you just live with the $200 clawback if you say, I'm not going to do this work. There could be a negative implication to your child. So just be aware of that. Now, we wanted to spend a few minutes, and I'm going to turn over the podium to Annie to talk a little bit about the disability tax credit, but a little bit about our law firm. As you know, this has been certainly our personal journey, and we're always advocating for our kids. And what we did back in 2009 is say, well, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of bundle some advocacy services and have that available to our clients on a more cost-effective basis. So we have this, what I often refer to as kind of like a paralegal division, and he's not a lawyer, but as I say, just to introduce her, she got her degree from the University of Mom, and which is worth more than any piece of paper on my office wall. On that. And so we've taken some of the things that she's learned, and for the last 16 years with this division called Disability Advocates, have done work like with AISH, PDD, guardianship and trusteeship, and try to provide that kind of little specialty service, like a paralegal service, if you will, so we can make it more cost effective. So what I want Annie to talk about, because this is what she does, is help people with the disability tax credit process, right? She can help through that process and talk a little bit about what would be involved on that very quickly, just because it's good general knowledge. Even if you go, well, I've already got it, I don't need to know how to apply. This is obviously going out both here and online to lots of people, so we wanted to give some basic information. We're going to touch on the disability tax credit, then we can maybe take some questions on the CDB, and then we'll move on to discussion of the current rules on AISH, and then move in after that to the new ADEP program. So with that, Annie.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to do a really quick, just the disability tax credit. Maybe lots of you already have it in place, but it is something that when they first talked about the CDB, they were telling people that they had to do the disability tax credit. And again, one more application for someone to do. And so especially for people who didn't have someone to help, it was very overwhelming, and there was a cost involved lots of times doing that. But hopefully, all of you have been able to do that. But if not, disability tax credit is looking at something different than AISH. AISH is looking at whether you can earn a living, at least what's set up now. Whereas disability tax credit is talking more about, is someone markedly restricted? So that's what they're looking at. So a different test, and that's what they're then basing. Once that is a yes, then the Canada Disability Benefit would then be, you'd be able to apply for that as well. But it is 2 applications. So it's, so the disability tax credit on screen, I think you have, if you can do the next one. Yeah, that's what it looks like. So you can just get it online if you haven't done it, but a physician needs to do it. And then from that, we don't have that on the slide, but from that then would enable someone also to be able to set up an RDSP. So if you haven't done it, that is a benefit to it as well, that you're able to set up an RDSP for an individual and also get a tax credit either for the individual or for the person who's assisting and covering the cost of that individual. Okay, so again, if you haven't done it, really important to do it. And then once that has been approved, so you can't do the CDB at the same time, you gotta wait till one is done before you can do the other. That would be really important. So now that they're sending letters and calling, I've got a number of calls from AISH already. Make sure that you're just informing, like they are gonna take the $200 off. And so really important at this point to make sure that if you're in the process, show them that you're in the process so that hopefully then they're seeing that you're doing it and they're not gonna do that. Okay, I think that's our way of at least stopping the clawback until I think they just want people to do it and to show something. So disability tax credit wise, you could send something in to show that you've done that, and even the CDB, you do get a result pretty quickly where you'll get a confirmation that you've done it. Make sure that you don't just get that you also send that into AISH. So hopefully that, even if they did take the $200 off, if you're able to show that, then hopefully the next month you would get that back. Okay, so just make sure that the communication to AISH is happening. Don't just assume that they know, or because they can check, but they're gonna not. The more you tell them, the better it is. Okay? Is there any questions about those things to start with?
One thing to say, our son is working, and we applied for this, and he got rejected from the federal government. But send that to AISH with your weekly pay stubs, right?
Yes.
But phone them, make sure they got it, because they
Yes.
won't look all the time anymore.
Yes, and just to confirm that they've seen that, or maybe if you're normally doing the pay stubs, maybe even doing it in a separate, I don't know if that you're usually emailing them in,
Yeah.
but if you're emailing them in, even doing a separate thing, because I'm wondering if it goes to different people, right?
These workers now, it's just approved.
Now it's a team, yes.
Yeah,
Repeat the question, too.
Yeah, so the question was, like, sending stuff in if there is a rejection, you also want to let them know that, so that they know they're not clawing it back when you didn't even have the ability to get it, right? So making sure that just communication is huge at this point, and making sure that they're actually getting it so that you're not assuming that they got it. But I would, again, on a practical basis, I would divide it out with, if you're normally doing the pay stubs, do it in a separate email, and your subject line probably has to be specifically CBD, like, just because I do think it kind of goes to different people, and you want to make sure it's not stuck on somebody's desk or somebody's inbox, and then the clawback happens. Okay. So talking a little bit about AISH, if no one else has anything right now. So for most people, you probably know lots already about AISH, but we wanted to touch base a little bit to show what it is, and unfortunately, what it's going to be. So some of looking at sort of what the rules are as far as AISH, and then what they're proposing as far as ADAP. So you have to be able to prove at this point that you have a severe disability, and really when I'm talking to clients, it's very much on, can you earn a living? I've talked all the time about the fact that doesn't mean you can't work. So really the program that's set up right now is meant that people can work at the same time. And whereas ADAP is almost making it seem like under AISH, you don't really have the ability to work, but you actually do. And so that's sort of how it was set up all along. Again, it starts at 18, and again, the applying 6 months ahead. So if you're talking to anyone, you can't sort of apply before because they'll send it back to you. But at the same time, if you call the AISH office and ask them how long does it normally take to get approval for an AISH application, you'll be told 6 to 8 months, but you can't apply till 6 months before. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You should be able to apply a little bit ahead if they're kind of backlogged, so that it's sort of in the system. But it should start at the age of 18, And again, it'll be, if approval isn't until a couple months after, it's their approval date, not when you're submitting date, that they will pay back retroactively for. Okay, so again, part of that frustrates me, because if they're slow, then you may miss a few months, which doesn't seem fair. Lots of times people who are applying for AISH are also possibly applying for PDD, so persons with developmental disabilities. So if there is a yes for getting support funding, so it's really support funding to pay for the support that that person is receiving, if that application is approved, then AISH will be approved as well. And my understanding is ADAP as well, but we're not quite sure. But if, what sometimes happens is people hear that and then don't do anything further as far as the AISH application. So you do have to apply for AISH even if PDD has been approved. Because there's also an asset test for AISH. So because of that, sometimes people haven't applied and then end up getting behind the ball and lose a number of months. So making sure that that if there is a yes for PDD, you still want to, at that 6-month period of time, apply. Okay, so it's started in 1979, very much on the premise that we as a society are going to help people who are not able to earn a living. We're going to help those who need, and that's very much the start of AISH, was very much with that premise that we as a society are going to help others in that. So at this point, it's $19.01 a month. A lot of the information that's out with ADAP right now very much talks about 1940. I honestly am not.
It's 2026 numbers.
Oh, that's the 2026 numbers. That's why. Because I was going to say 1901 is very much what they're getting now. Health benefits, and at this point, as long as somebody is on AISH, even if they're down to $1 because they're making too much, they would still sort of receive those health benefits, which is a pretty big deal. And again, the asset test would be the $100,000 amount that they're allowed to have, and that was put in place in 1999, and it's still 100. So I don't know what cost of living went up a little bit, but we're still sitting at 100,000 as far as the asset test. So that's sort of where we are right now in health benefits. In many ways very good, because lots of people would have a very difficult time sort of being able to cover. So again, that is definitely an asset. Dental and optical as well are a great thing. The one thing I would probably say about that is it does make a difference which dentist you go to, and even which optician you go to. Make sure that it's a place that is okay with somebody on AISH coming in, and that they are covering all of the benefit, like all that needs to be done. For dental, it should be cleanings, and it should be things like fillings and that sort of thing. I'll use my daughter as an example. A dentist actually did half her mouth and said, "I've used all my points, so we can't finish." So I don't know if they thought, 1 year she was going to get the top done and the next year she was going to get the bottom done. They actually did that. And so you want to make sure your dentist is going to cover the whole amount, and there's lots of dentists that will, without ever questioning, or do fillings or do all of those things. And same with getting glasses. Lots of times they'll have a selection of frames you can choose from, and lots of times there's no cost at all for glasses, whereas lots of times glasses, I don't know about yours, but lots of times glasses cost way more than the $250 that supposedly they cover. So again, going to a good place. So if you've had issues with any of those things, find somebody else, because there are good ones out there. But again, covering a lot of the different emergency, if there was an ambulance, diabetic supplies, and just any aids to daily living. So lots of those things are very, very beneficial to the people who are getting AISH. So the asset test again is that $100,000, which again has been the same sort of all along. And so, and the income test again, because again, throughout we've been able to encourage people to work if they're able. And so that 1,072 at this point is the number that they're saying that somebody can earn before they're going to claw anything back. And then a portion is kind of going off 50% for an amount, and then dollar for dollar once it gets higher. So again, at this point, people are able to work and so on. And that's there is a higher amount if it's a family. That's a single one. And then trust income. So we've talked a lot. One of the asset tests. So again, maybe we go forward a little bit. Can I talk about that first? One more. Can I talk to this and go back? Yep. Initially, it was before pre-April 2018, you were allowed to have an RESP, which again is what you can set up after getting the disability tax credit. You can have a principal residence, of course, have to be living in that, and then a vehicle. And so that was the initial. And now, after 2018, same thing, but now they've added trusts. So again, we're talking about exempt assets. So again, a trust would, so if I can go back now, sorry, a couple screens. So again, if we've set up a trust, then there's an amount of money that can come out before AISH is going to claw a portion back. So when we have a trust for a single, the amount coming out before they would take anything back was $300, and if it is a couple or a family, then it's $875. So again, it isn't just that you can take any amount out. It is before they claw back. That's the starting amount, and then 25% of the remainder that you're taking out is actually what they would take. Yes. Hi. Hi.
Is the $300 a month, a year, or it just doesn't matter? It's just, excuse me,
Yes, it's a month.
$300 a month?
It's a month. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, you can go on. Okay, so again, there's, sorry about jumping around, but there's exempt assets and non-exempt. So a house, $100,000, a house, a car. If someone is wheelchair bound, you can have a second vehicle, which is a wheelchair assist. You can have an RDSP, and you can have a trust. And so those are the things that you can have that are that are exempt, and then non-exempt, anything sort of that you have above the 100,000. So again, what they're looking at when they're looking at the 100 is TFSA. They look at an RESP. I heard someone this week say that a worker told them that the RESP wouldn't be included. That's not at all what I've seen happen. So again, an RESP would be the included as well, and anything in a bank account for that individual would be part of your 100. So if you went over the 100, you have to tell AISH any changes. So once you're over 100, then you would need to let them know, and then again at this point would be taken off AISH until you were below 100 is what would happen. Okay?
Are you saying RDSP?
Our DSP is an exempt.
Okay.
Our ESP would be on the
RDSP?
yeah. So again, sometimes it looks at, so if there's a family RESP, lots of times we have to fill it in, but if there's 4 kids, they would look at just the portion that possibly that child would use.
An RESP is education fund.
Yeah, RESP is for education.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah. You can go on. Nope. Okay, so, pardon? can't read that. With my eyes. Hang on. So basically what they're doing now, so all the phone calls and the letters and so on, is they're starting to enforce sort of making sure that you are doing all the things. So they're, again, you've got letters and phone calls saying, make sure you're doing the CDB. And so, so just making sure that everybody is doing that. And again, sort of being very clear that they are going to take back the $200 if you don't do it. But again, so sometimes if people sort of weren't sure what to do and now you're sort of in the middle of, but I wasn't sure that I had to do it, and now I still have to do the disability tax credit and I haven't done that yet, my suggestion would just make sure that you're telling them what you're doing, showing them that you've done the application, that sort of thing, so that hopefully they aren't going to claw back, that you're showing you're complying, but it took you longer. And hopefully there's some, hopefully they're going to look at that and be okay with that. It'll be interesting what the next month is going to hold as far as how people are pushing, how AISH is pushing back on people. But again, like I said, just making sure that you're communicating with them and letting them know. And the interesting thing that I found was that the $200 a month, it's interesting that not everybody, though, is seeming like they're getting that. So I'm not sure how that's tallied. I've seen that on, like some numbers are lower than the 200. And so I haven't quite figured all that out either. It's all new to me too. So, but at this point, it will be the 200 that AISH is looking at clawing back, not a different number. Okay, you're up next.
All right, so why don't we take a pause there and just see if there's any questions. As we talked about, we want to understand sort of the current AISH program as we get into what it's going to be in the proposed new ADAP program that's scheduled to come into effect on July 1st of 2026. So we'll get into talking about that, but can take any questions specifically with the AISH program, a little bit of its history, what is the structure, obviously a pretty fundamental support program. And from my perspective as an estate planning lawyer, very much part of the conversation of planning for your child if you're not around, right, is to ensure that they have the, that they have the programs in place that will provide ongoing support for that child. Any questions about sort of the exempt assets and AISH before we get into this new ADAP program? Happy to take questions at this time. Yep.
The exempt assets slide.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'm understanding this. So RDSP, principal residence vehicle, $100,000. So principal residence, like having a property in someone with a disability's name, 100,000?
No.
All right, so just a clarification of that. Let me go back. The important point of this slide is the bottom words there, that there's no limit on the exempt assets, right? So in terms of, I've given you the list of the four main ones. There's a few actual little other smaller ones, such as a prepaid funeral and household items and smaller items, but these are the big ticket items, right? Those four. So there's no limit on the value of that home. There's no limit on the value of,
Making sense.
right, but
$100,000.
yeah, it's in small print, but if you see on the bottom there, the non-exempt assets. So the rule is, let me take a step back. The policy of AISH is to provide supports for Albertans of lesser means. And the government has determined, as of 1999, that lesser means you own less than $100,000 of non-exempt assets, right? Not all your assets, just what fits in their column, right? Whatever fits in that column over there cannot exceed $100,000. So money in the bank, your TFSA, your RSP, mutual funds, GICs, all that stuff. The stuff you own cannot exceed $100,000. Interestingly, there's no limit on the exempt assets, right? So let's just take a weird example to illustrate the point. the disabled child, the person on AISH, could be living in a property in Springbank worth $1.2 million on an acreage. Nothing in the AISH regulations to say that's offside, right? There's no limit. It just has to be their principal residence. It's where they are living, which is the key factor. There's no limit to the amount that can be in the trust. Annie reviewed the rules relating to money coming out of the trust, but the actual amount in the trust, there's no limit. There's no limit on the value of the vehicle, those sorts of things. Although if they're driving around in a Ferrari, it might raise a few eyeballs with the AISH worker. But does that help?
It does.
So the exempt category, no limit. The non-exempt category cannot exceed $100,000. So what you want to be careful about is making sure, in my example, your child never has those assets exceed $100,000. You should be moving that into exempt assets like an RDSP, or in some cases we've had to set up trusts for AISH recipients to put money into a trust to ensure that it's part of the exempt, it gets in the exempt column. But in that circumstance, we got to be really mindful of that for continued eligibility. The one other thing, and then I'll take your question, the other thing would be there is a rule under AISH that, for example, if you come into some money, somebody, a family member of your kid, carrying on with my example, leaves an inheritance for that child that's more than $100,000 in combination with everything that they own, they go, hey, they're offside. There's more than 100 grand in the bank, right? Because you got a check from the estate lawyer and they put it in the bank and boom, you're offside. So you have an opportunity to move it into an exempt asset, and there is some opportunity to notify AISH, and you have 365 days, 1 year, to move it into an exempt asset. But as Annie said, you have an obligation to inform. Yeah.
That may answer my question, because something happens to us and he inherits our home and he wants to downsize, and he sells $1 million home and moves into a $500,000 home, he ends up with 500 grand in the bank. Now, you say that 500 grand could automatically go into the trust fund, or?
Right, so the question, good question, which is, well, if I leave my home to my child who's on AISH, let's say my home's worth $1 million, and then the child, so that fits the category of principal residence exemption, but then my child wants to downsize, so sells the home, and then the new home moves from the acreage to the condo, and then the difference is $500,000, that goes into the bank, and is there a problem? The answer is yes, there's a problem, because now we have moved an asset via the sale from the exempt category over into the non-exempt category, and now you're offside. But there's a silver lining, there's a good news here. Of course, and it involves a lawyer, so that's why it's a good news story. I knew that would get a smile. I know this guy here, so I knew that would get a smile, so that's why I said it. The good news is that if you set up a trust in your will, and you say, let's call it Johnny is your child, and you say, Johnny, you could say, here's the home. So Johnny gets the transfer from estate to Johnny's name at land titles, right? It's right there. You look at land titles, has Johnny's name on it. Not a problem as long as he's living there, is a problem when he downsizes, right? But another solution would be put it in a trust, right? And what we know is that as of April of 2018, so for the last over 7 years, a property in a trust is exempt, right? So if you are, from an estate planning perspective, you foreshadowed one of the tips or things to think about from a legal perspective that we could talk about kind of the end is you want to ensure you're careful about how you hand over an inheritance to Johnny, right? And my thought, the starting recommendation, but it depends on each family situation, would be give Johnny the house in a trust. Have it part of that trust, often referred to as a Henson trust, so that it's protected, the right person's in charge of it, and it'll be protected for AISH purposes. And it won't, now it stays in the exempt column, and it doesn't go to the non-exempt column. Make sense? Thank you. Okay, I think you just set me up for that one. You'll make me look good. There you go. Yeah.
Do you not have to have a tax credit thing to even open up an RDSP?
Okay, so the question is, do you need a tax thing to open up an RDSP? And yes, you do. The answer is yes. So one of the requirements of the RDSP, so that's Registered Disability Savings Plan, again, another acronym, but something which is really important for the financial security of your child. You can set up an RDSP. It came into play in 2008. And with that program, as we've learned, that's completely exempt for AISH purposes. So pretty huge, right? This is kind of like your kid's pension plan, right? If the child can't work, they're not going to have a pension. If they have an RRSP, that's part of the 100,000. Well, that could grow more than any RRSP would likely be more than 100,000. So the long-term savings plan for a disabled child in Canada is a registered disability savings plan. The money going in and the money going out is exempt for AISH purposes, right? So that, to compare and contrast, is like, get that exempt, non-exempt category. They didn't apply that. The hope was they were going to do that to the Canada Disability Benefit, but they didn't, right? They sort of didn't make that exempt like the other provinces that we talked about before. So in order to set up the RDSP, I gave you a little bit of a soliloquy on the basis of an RDSP. So yes, you should have it. But in order to get it, you need a number of things. The key one is the disability tax credit, right? This federal program that you apply for, that's a tax credit. That is kind of the gateway for the disability benefits for the federal government. There was, a few years ago, I went to a group of lawyers in Edmonton and did a talk entirely, the whole session was entirely on how the disability tax credit is a gateway to all these federal programs. It's a good takeaway to think about is it just heightens the importance of getting the disability tax credit and keeping it, right? So the other little tidbit would be if you look, you got to look at the letter you got from CRA qualifying for the disability tax credit, and it could say in there, well, the child has it for the rest of their life. But we've seen some pretty bizarre situations in rather obvious circumstances. The child's disability is not going away, and they go, well, you got to come back and reapply in 10 years, right? So just little tip. Don't assume, but read the letter and just make sure if there's a deadline that you're supposed to reapply or give new information or affirming information to CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, then don't let that deadline go by. Because now you begin to see, well, if I lose the disability tax credit, I might lose the Canada Disability Benefit. If I lose the disability tax credit, I may no longer have an RDSP. Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And I can go on and on about the importance of the disability tax credit, but that's not the point of this talk. We just certainly want to talk about ADAP, but I do, with this group and those online, to say more and more. While we can argue if you can start with the premise that the federal government is being generous and offering these programs to disabled Canadian, their litmus test, their gateway, the entrance, the passport to get to these programs is the disability tax credit, right? So if you don't have it, you got to get it. You should get it. And quite frankly, now you're going to have to get it, or at least, you're going to have to at least apply to get it for AISH purposes. I think I saw another hand, but last little comment, and then we'll take the question over there. A lot of people over the years have said to me, well, my kid doesn't make that much money. I don't care about the tax credit. It's, not worth that much money. I'm not going to bother applying it. Thinking of it as, well, it's a tax credit. It's like a charitable receipt. You save money on taxes. So the thinking is, well, if my kid doesn't pay much in taxes, what do I care? I guess the point of talking about the disability tax credit and what I want to leave with you is the high importance of the disability tax credit in the context of accessing federal programs. such as Canada Disability Benefits, such as an RDSP, and others as well. Even tax treatment for the trust you have in your will. It could be a qualified disability trust if you have the DTC. And I could, you know, again, I'm getting into this other talk, but hopefully that's helpful to sort of set the stage for why you should get it, even though now you can argue I have to get it because AISH is telling me I have to, right? But it's not a bad thing. And if you don't have it, you should get it. That would be my advocacy, is there's lots of reasons to have it, and really now the government is sort of forcing the hand for, like my other client who said he doesn't need it, well now he's gonna have to go get it. If you were diligent in getting it earlier, then you've already got that part of it done and you can move straight to the CDB application, right, for the $200 a month. Does that answer the question a bit?
I didn't really have a question, I was just making a statement.
I'm smiling here for the people online. You don't, you know, hopefully you pick up the laughter, but I'm smiling only because Annie behind me would say, well, welcome to my life with Gord. I just say one thing and he goes off on this tangent and starts talking and never stops talking. As you can tell, we're passionate about the subject matter and we love talking about it. And if I feel like I got a room full of people who are listening to me, I will put my educator hat on and try to teach. So forgiveness for that, but thank you for giving me a platform to talk. Yes, we'll put it there. Over here.
We applied for the disability tax credit. We were actually able to move that credit over to us for savings on our taxes. Our accountant was the one that told us. So even though you think your kid is not really getting any benefit out of it, you get some benefit out of it, and you'll go, okay, I'm paying a little bit less taxes, and it goes around the home too, right?
Right. So the question was, well, actually, it wasn't a question. Now I'm alert to this. It was a statement, which was, well, wait a minute. There may be a benefit of using that tax credit you spoke of, Gord, on your own taxes. So now parent gets to use it even though the kid is qualified, because if the kid earns no income, there's no tax savings there. And that is true. There are some very specific rules, but if your kid is living with you or in that dependency relationship, and if you fit the CRA rules, you will be able to use that tax credit. Point number one. So thank you for that. That's good.
And just another footnote, we had to challenge it a few times.
Yeah.
Because the young man that lives with us, he's been with us for over 20-some years, and he's not adopted by us. But we challenged it and we did win,
So the comment here was, if I can paraphrase, you had to fight like heck to get the disability tax credit.
we got it for him, but to take it off of our taxes, we had to.
Okay, so her comment was there was some advocacy required and some persistence to be able to get the benefit of the tax credit on your tax return. It wasn't a slam dunk, right? It took a little bit of work, but persevered at the end. So yeah, take a look at, there are some very specific rules. So that's where the accountant would be involved saying, do I fit those rules? And then be an push on that. The corollary comment that I'll make to that is that if you are applying, you can go back up to 10 years on prior tax returns. So the benefit you were speaking of with regard to using it on your personal tax returns, you can exponentially increase that if you're able to go back at least 10 years or to the point of the disability, depending if it was from birth, and it may be able to go back 10 years, but depending on, if the person was in an accident, then it might be to the point of the accident, right? So depending on the medical evidence. But you can go back retroactively to look at that application going, well, I didn't know at the time I filed my other tax returns that I would qualify. Now that I do qualify, will you go back? And it used to be you had to write a regular letter. It's a little simplified now in terms of that going back. But that's another benefit. We've seen people come into significant amounts of money by virtue of making that application, learning about the disability tax credit, and then being able to get a very healthy tax return. Sometimes, I've seen people talk about, in the $30,000 to $50,000 range for refunds going back.
Just so you know, if the child's not legally yours, they won't let you go back. But if you apply, they will give you something. So, yeah, they won't. If that child would have to be adopted, it would have to be personal family. So
Did you adopt your child?
No. So,
You're just you're the caregiver. Okay, so for the benefit of the online audience, the comment was the retroactive payment that I spoke of is not applicable. I'm going to say it this way, unless it's your kid or an adopted child.
yeah, correct.
That if you are looking after the kid as a guardian, right, then that's not applicable.
No.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, that strikes me as, I don't know that I've run across that or if you've seen that before, but that's helpful to know that in terms of just putting a qualification on the retroactive.
Yeah, you'll get that little bit of tax break per year. but
Yeah, so you get it, her point would be, she got it with some effort and advocacy going forward, but she wasn't able to get it back because of those circumstances, not bio or adopted. Okay, good to
What
know.
happens if she died? I mean, what happens if that was a parent and they died and they were using this?
Okay, so in the context of a parent using the tax credit for the child, what if the parent dies? I think the analysis would be, would somebody who stepped in as a caregiver or guardian, if the person was living with them, would they be entitled to it? If you don't fit the rules, and that's where, in this case, I'm just going to guess, going back to the question, is this person is living with you?
Correct.
Right, so the answer is yes, it was living. And I do believe that is one of the criteria amongst that CRA has. So in a situation where, let's say, parent dies and child goes to a group home or a facility, then you don't have the same benefit of utilizing that tax credit on your own tax returns. So again, that's sort of a matter for the accountants, and saying once, my advocacy would be get the disability tax credit, right? And we're explaining why you need it in here. But once you get it, do ask the question, because if the accountant's not familiar with it, they may not know, right? Or get to an accountant who does know, or push on that to say there. But otherwise, I think the answer to your question is, when the parent dies, the benefit of that, the tax credit for the disability, for the DTC, would fall off the table. Okay? All right.
A credit card, not the rest.
But the tax credit. We're talking about the use of the tax credit on the return was kind of the conversation here. Yeah, good questions. That means Jerry's fed you enough sweet goodies, and the glucose levels are high enough that we're all staying awake on this. Okay, so let's, any further questions? What I like about FAIM is when I come here, there's great questions. You always got really good, there's a good audience and good questions. So that is heartening that you're listening and you're asking good questions, and keep it coming. Okay, last chance. Okay, so let's move into the discussion of ADAP. Okay, I'm going to start this by expanding a little bit on what I said at the outset, which is we only know what we know and there's lots we don't know, right? So this is the part of the presentation where I've got to prognosticate and say, well, this is what I think is the future, but it's kind of a murky crystal ball. There's not clarity. Point number one, in my world, I go, show me the law. I want to read legislation, right? That's what I'm trained to do. That's what, read an act and read the regulations and say, this is the law. And I render legal opinions about that. All I've got is a discussion paper, right? And what I'm reading on the news and what comes out of the government. So it's not comfortable to rely on that, right? In terms of saying here what the rules are. But I can't make it clearer than what it is. But just stating the fact would be there's an element of this is where we think it's going, but I don't know what the rules are. The way it's going to work is, I think, my best estimate would be in the fall legislature, when the government starts its legislative sitting here in the fall, I think they absolutely must introduce legislation. I just don't know, knowing the legislative process, how they're going to get it done by July 1st and figure all this out in the absence of rules, right? On the town halls, maybe some of you participated in those. They talked about, well, we got to hire people and we got to do this, and we'll see there's a medical review board and there's appeals and there's this. And I'm like, how are you going to figure all this out in the absence of legislative authority? So knowing that, and there's a whole pile of work for the government to figure things out, they've got to have something by Christmas. I just don't see that a July 1st date is even reasonable if they don't have it. But that's my opinion. That's not a guarantee. But what I want to suggest by bringing this up is that we're hopefully going to have more details this fall. So this is based on what we know so far for ADAP, but there could be a lot of changes between now and July 1st of 2026. In particular, if I do by analogy, I was pretty involved and actively following all the rules, back in 2018 about Henson Trust in Alberta, right? And was advocating for that and working with the government on those issues. And oh my goodness, did that ever take a long time to bring that into place, and all that goes to committee and then this and first and second reading, and the whole legislative process was rather an eye-opening process to partake in. If we're going through that kind of process now, and hopefully as parents of children with long-term disabilities, we have an opportunity to advocate and maybe influence some of the rules or change some of the rules, this could be an evolving process. So this isn't the last seminar you're going to have to go to study this, but I'm hopeful maybe we can come back or we can continue to provide further information with regard to this program, because it's at the early stages. But the more we know, the more we can advocate, the more we know, the more we can plan for how this is going to impact our kids. Yes?
What does ADAP stand for?
Okay, thank you. The question, again, we're sitting with the acronyms, is the Alberta Disability Assistance Program, or ADAP. The question is, what does ADAP stand for? So that's the acronym for this new program. And the new program is two-tiered. I look at it and go, well, I thought in Canada we didn't like two-tiered systems in the medical system, but we're getting a two-tiered system for disabled children, right? And the two systems are going to be AISH and ADAP. So AISH is not going away, but they're coming up with new rules for kind of a two-tiered system. The thing you need to understand with regard to the two-tiered system, it's based on your ability, actual or perceived, to work, right? So AISH is for people who are permanently unable to work. That's going to be what AISH is for, right? ADAP is going to be for people who can work. So let's just pause there for a moment. So just understanding kind of where the government is coming from, because that if you understand a little bit of their policy, maybe that helps to try to make sense of these. Not that you have to agree with it, but it helps to make sense of some of the rules. So as best as I see it is that there's a bunch of people in the caucus room of the UCP going, I think there's people abusing AISH. There's people who are just being lazy and sitting at home and getting that paycheck, and they should work, doggone it. I know somebody who's able-bodied and is getting AISH, and I think we ought to change the rules to come up with a system where they can work. Again, I'm struggling to sort of understand some of the rationale about why they're doing it. As Annie alluded to in her presentation, there's already an ability to earn an income under AISH, right? You can earn, a single person can be $1,072, and I think it's a higher for a couple. But why not just increase that amount? Why not improve the exemption amounts for employment income to encourage people to go out and make more money? Wouldn't that solve the problem? Well, no, they said we got to throw a hand grenade in the middle of the whole disability community and come up with this two-tiered system. Again, apologies for the cynicism for that, but I sometimes wonder, okay, why are you doing all this? This has got to be the most inefficient. They're spending millions and millions of dollars. Then the one in town hall, the minister in charge was indicating just to implement and to do all these things, they set a budget of $145 million. And I go, well, why don't you divide that by 77,000 and call it a day, right? Like, what is going on here? Anyway, you see, Annie's going to now turn around and say, no, I do not want to be the wife of a politician. But it just, the stuff drives me crazy. So we in understanding the system, they're going to have a two-tiered system. You can work or you can't work. And AISH is going to be limited for those that are very clearly can't work. And I think what they're targeting is the people, actual or perceived, who can work, right? And so from that perspective, that's, I think, what's driving this. That's the only thing I can think of. And With that being said, if you listen to the government speak, it's like they're doing this for the benefit of the disability community and responding to the needs of what the disability community has said, and that they want more, the ability to earn more money. They don't want a disincentive for working on that. Again, I say you don't need to throw the hand grenade. Why not just adjust the current rules to encourage people to work? That's laudable. I agree with that, right? And keep them on AISH. With that being said, I'm sort of hopeful that if we get to July 1st of 2026 and looking at it in between, we're going to see some net benefits. I don't, as much as I can be a cynic and of what the government does and their stated intention, I'm hopeful that we can look at it and there is some actual benefit, and I can stand here at a future presentation and say, well, here's the actual benefit. Now I'm only left with what's on the discussion paper. One last comment and then I'll take your question, just on this slide. But what you need to realize is that what they're going to do on midnight of I guess the last day of June, for effective July 1st, is everybody gets moved over from AISH to ADAP, this new program, and then you have to apply to get back on AISH. All right, no, so then you start thinking, okay, I know what's going through every one of your minds, and Danielle Smith, if you're watching this is what you're doing. There was a gasp in the room, and the amount of work you're giving to parents who have children with long-term disability is enormous, and it's wrong. All right, there's my political statement. But right, you're gonna have to go and do all the medical evidence and go through all this again. If it's not that our job isn't hard enough to advocate for our kids or to support our kids, now we got to do some more work, right? And we've got to reestablish that this person is unable to permanently work, right? And so I just see a minefield here of, well, looks like the person can work, right? Doesn't look disabled to me, heralding back to the Klein comments back in his era, where he pointed to people and said, well, it doesn't look disabled to me, right? How many of us have, I know lots of, you look at somebody with schizophrenia, you look at somebody who's on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. They may not look disabled, but they are disabled. We know that because we have to live with them day in day and deal with all the issues that come out of that. There may not be the same obvious factors. So this could be a bit of a nightmare in terms of the medical review board coming through. But we'll get into some of the details on what we know, but all we know is what the government has said, this is where we're going, right? But they haven't introduced the legislation. Yes?
I think you did answer some of it, but sitting here as a parent, knowing what we had to go through just to get as far as we are now, PDD, AISH, disability tax credit. And I know that there isn't a lot of information out yet, like you've said. Who's going to make the decision about who's able to work and not work is one. And as you said, it's going to be an enormous amount of work for us to do, if we have to reapply and go through this all again. Then, if that's what they're going to do, then there should be something like, say, EI, which does, if someone is somewhat able to work, there should be some sort of re-education program, something that they can get some schooling or whatever to put them into maybe something that they can do.
So the question was saying, well, this sounds like a whole lot of work, and we acknowledging the amount of work required to get supports is huge. We observed that, like back in 2009 when we said we should set up disability advocates. It was because we saw that some parents, not all, but some parents need help. That's been Annie's job since 2009, is to help parents with that process, right? And it's hard and it's complicated and there's all these different rules and it's not an easy system and you need medical reports and all the rest of it. From what I can tell, there's going to be potentially a whole bunch of work in dusting those assessments off, and now you got to go hire people to reassess what their rules are, and are they going to fast track certain people or go, okay, if you got Down syndrome, you're in right away, or maybe not, or we don't know, right? I'm just worried. I'm worried about it on that. The answer to your question, which was who's going to determine this? The answer based on the discussion paper is it's the medical review board, and it's people appointed by the government. So I translate that to be, it would be the government, right? And if they make a decision about from a medical perspective, so assuming they're going to hire doctors and other practitioners who are skilled in this area to make a decision, as it stands right now, there's no appeal from that either.
Doctors are already, we don't have enough doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah, few and far between. The ones that are there are so busy now that even if you take a form, they want 2, 3, 4, 5 months to fill it out.
So the question here would be, acknowledging there's a shortage of doctors, and doctors are overworked, and there's already a delay in getting forms filled out. Citing an example, you go to the doctor, it takes 2 or 3 months to fill out a form, right? Acknowledging even that disability tax credit. Remember, we had the little screenshot of the first page to say there's a form out there you have to fill out. 16 pages, right, that you got to fill out. So these are getting more complex. They're not necessarily easy forms to fill out. So I acknowledge your point and repeat it for the benefit of the audience, is that there's just going to be a whole lot more work. and I think more advocacy, like what happens if you think they're not interpreting correctly your child's ability to work, right? They don't get it. I'm fearful they're not going to get it. What I look at is I go, the people who get it in the society of Alberta are the parents. They understand. But I have some misgivings over a bureaucrat, right? Anyway, I'm getting on my soapbox, and I got to be careful here. I think what's that?
Can I answer part of what she said?
Sure. Stand up, please.
One of the things that you asked was about the training and so on. What government has thrown out so far is that, they're going to have people that are going to be in place to sort of be job coaches. I'm not sure where they found 77,000 job coaches, and that they're going to have training sort of more like talking about maybe resume making, all of those sorts of things. And they're very much making it appear that suddenly there's going to be jobs for all of these people and that they're going to earn a fair wage. And they've talked a little bit about wage subsidies and so on. That could be part of it for employers. Again, that doesn't guarantee that the person who's receiving that understands disability and is going to treat that individual correct. So they're throwing out all of these things, which could happen within AISH as well. So they're throwing out that there will be training different things and that people have to also take part in that or possibly look at whether they're still on the ADAP. But everybody who's on AISH is not going to be taken, like some people fear that if someone's on AISH that they're not going to be on, like you will be in a program. Like everybody on AISH is going to be in ADAP. It's not that suddenly you're going to have to start from scratch. So don't worry about that part, but there will be a part in between to make sure that you can prove can they work or not. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think we may have that on a future slide in terms of some of the sports, and that was one of the questions about saying, well, I think to your question of, well, how are they going to help with this? What they are saying is they're going to. So I guess just trust the government. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Okay, we had a question there, somewhere there, and then there. So
145 million is going into actually work programs and aims for these kids to get jobs and that.
Yeah. So so the correction of the question was that it was 185. Is that right? If that's the number, then I could stand corrected on that. That it's going into the program to help with the supports and all the rest of it, and that that the minister spoke about getting this funding to provide the assistance for this new program. I still say put it into AISH, right? Don't throw the hand grenade. But I don't think you're arguing with me on that. You're just saying, yeah, the number may be a little bit higher, but there's an enormous amount of money going into retooling the existing system. I think with the policy of saying there's people on AISH who could work and shouldn't be getting AISH. I don't know, if it's 185 or 145, whatever the number is, right? It's a big number. That's a huge number in my world. If you're actually solving a problem, is it worth $185,000? Is there $185,000 of abuse? Or million, sorry, $185 million worth of abuse within the AISH system? Like, come on. I don't think so. But with that being said, I am trusting that there's smart people in Edmonton at the legislature with the UCP that have studied this issue and they've determined there's a problem and this is a good economic solution. It darn well better be that for throwing the hand grenade in the middle of a system and creating stress for everybody. And anyway, enough on that. So thank you for that clarification with regard to that. Yep.
Well, you talk about smart people. It took our lawyer over a year for us to become guardians of our own children, so we could get AISH. So that's one example. If everybody has to go through that process, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah, so the comment here was a long time required working with a professional advisor to be able to get the guardianship and trusteeship in place for your, I guess what would have been your child who was becoming an adult, right? And you needed the guardianship and trusteeship order in place. It can be a long process. It's a complicated process. That's part of what Annie does. A good portion of her practice, probably 75%, is processing guardianship and trusteeship applications. Part of me says it shouldn't take a year, but I think your point is, if I can extrapolate to make another point, the systems in place are complicated enough, and you've got a big job on your hands looking after your kid. And I guess the theme of the presentation is, well, you just got more work. Right? To go understand all this, you got to attend a session, you got to try to wrap your head around it, and then sort of figure out how your kid's going to be impacted by this, and then some more advocacy required with regard to that. But yeah, it's a long haul on a whole number of different fronts. Obviously, it's different for every family. Thank you for sharing that experience with regard to it, and it just means, yeah, there's no end to the work, right, to look after our kids. Yeah. Thank you for that. Other questions? Otherwise, we'll jump into ADAP. Okay, so with ADAP, what I've tried to do is I look at their discussion paper, which again is available. We can send it to Jerry to circulate, but there's also, you've probably seen it already or may have even read it. This is what we can see with regard to the ADAP. So I've kind of gone through their headings and their material. First of all, eligibility, you got to be 18. You can't be entitled to receive OAS. I think in general that would mean adult between 18 and 65, although I guess if you get the OAS pension early, then that may mean you're off of ADAP. You live in Alberta, it makes sense. You got to be a Canadian citizen or permanent resident, not living in a correctional facility or mental health facility. And that on the financial side for the eligibility, you do have to disclose, again, income. They're going to determine what's exempt and what's non-exempt. What we know so far in general regarding eligibility is that they're going to adopt the same tests for assets as under AISH. I want to see it in writing. The devil's in the details, right? I haven't seen the legislation or the regulations, but what they're saying is we're just moving people over. It's the same rules. So, okay, we'll wait and see, but that's what they're saying so far. The medical eligibility is going to be that they have, and you see on the slide there, again, it's all in the handouts you can take with you tonight, a significant impairment of mental or physical functioning that is permanent or likely to continue for at least 2 years, right? So that's kind of their criteria for ADAP. And the impairment, including the anticipated duration, has been diagnosed and substantiated through relevant medical and psychological reports. All right, start the paper chase, right? Starting to dust off those assessments and saying, I got to redo them, because maybe you had to the point of you did a whole lot of work. It was one of the questions over here, and it's like, do you have to redo all that? It kind of sounds like it on my initial reading of it, because they want to see reports. And anyway, and there's no other remedial treatment that's available for their impairment, right? So I mean, that makes it sound like, okay, that's the test to going in. Part of the concern here that I think with the amount of money that the government is spending with regard to these programs, and it's been ballooning over the years, there's no doubt of that. If you look at the charts, it's all on upward trajectory. And so I think if we study it, the concern would be that they're actually raising the bar to be eligible for these programs. Now, if you have, for anybody here going, my child's already on AISH, as Annie's indicated, no one's getting kicked off on this. I think this is probably going to be a higher bar for people to get on with regard to that. But they've assured that no one's going to get kicked off as a result of this program. You're going to be eligible for one of the programs. The benefit may be different in terms of what you're entitled to receive. And what we know so far is it's $200 less. We'll get to that in a moment. But there is a medical eligibility test in addition to some of the basic information. You got to live here. You can't be in jail, etc. Right? Okay. There's going to be a single combined application for AISH and ADAP starting on July 1 of 2026. So you get, from what we understand, there's going to be two portions of it. We didn't get into detail, but if you talk to Annie about the disability tax credit, there's two parts to that as well. So they're almost seeming like they're modeling that. So if you had some experience with the disability tax credit, well, tell us about the person, and then there's what the doctor fills out, right? The part that the doctor has to talk about the medical impairment for the disability tax credit. So there's the disability assistance application and a disability assistance medical report. So, I mean, hopefully we have some more details, because to the point, an audience member had said, well, it takes me 2 or 3 months just to get a form filled out. There's another form to fill out, right? So how much in advance do you have to start working to get that form filled out to do this application process effective July 1 of 2026? I mean, I wish I knew the details and can do them here, but these are the things that we hopefully will get answers to as we go through the process. But kind of has to be completed by a medical professional who is registered in Alberta to diagnose for that. Which has me to the point of shortage of doctors. And Annie was querying, well, where are they going to find the jobs? Where are they going to find all the people that are going to be support workers, like for our kids who are trying to work and somebody has to be there shadowing them, that sort of thing. Where are they going to find the doctors to fill out, all these medical practitioners to fill out these forms if there's a shortage? There's going to be a huge backlog. So I'm going, oh my goodness. Which leads me to only to conclude that hopefully they've got to have this stuff in place in the fall to be able to establish a budget to go out and be able to hire these people or provide these facilities to be able to do it. But they have the medical report. Then there's an adjudication process, right? Well, that's stuff that a lawyer is familiar with, right? We go to court for adjudication, or we go to binding arbitration. You hear of these things, right? You go through to resolve disputes, but they have an adjudication process. So the individuals have to be assessed as not having a severe disability, will be determined ineligible for AISH or ADAP. They may be eligible for other support programs such as income relief. This screams to me as they're trying to get people off of AISH. I don't know. I'm the cynic. But I think I have a right to be cynical or questioning the government with regard to this. So if they're assessed to have a severe disability and some ability to work or requiring further verification, will be approved for ADAP, right? So they first have to prove they have a severe disability and the ability to work with that. Individuals assessed of having a severe disability, same qualification, that results in them being permanently unable to work. That word means something. In law, words are important. And, well, that means there's no hope of ever working. Well, that's different than, well, he could get better. He could work, right? So is that where this is going? Well, you could work, so now you're not on AISH, right? And get to receive the enhanced benefit. You get the lower benefits under ADAP. Will be reviewed to a medical review panel to confirm or deny eligibility for AISH, right? So there's this whole medical process, and it goes to this board. I mean, what we are familiar with in AISH is I think they dub it the citizens panel, right? So that if you have to appeal determination of eligibility for AISH, you can go to this appeal panel made up of representations, and it's kind of like a mini court. You sit in a room and you pitch, you make your arguments, and you know, a group of 3 will make a determination of, was the assessment for the AISH application proper, or does it get overturned, right, with a different decision? I know we had to do that for one of our children, right? Because again, the same thing, looked like, you know, had to advocate to go, no, there is actually a disability there, right? So that was already a problem in the AISH program. I think it's going to be enhanced from what I can see under the ADAP program, but, you know, stay tuned on that. So these are what they're saying is the test. This isn't law, but this is what their policy is. So presumably they're giving this policy to a lawyer working for the Alberta government, who's then going to write legislation based on this policy, like, you know, come up with the actual precise language, which we then can say, well, this is what it means. Yeah.
You just said that they would move you from H to this ADAP at a lower rate. Is that already been predetermined?
Yes.
Sorry, I will wait.
Let me.
I'm sorry.
17.
Yeah, so let me jump ahead a few slides and then we'll go back. So the question is, with regard to this reduced benefit, I alluded to it and that caused the question. So I tell you, you're not sleeping. I mean, you're still listening to me, so this is a good thing. So, you know, let's crunch the numbers here. What they are saying is that AISH is going to get an increase of $39. So we go from 1901 into 1940. So I think that's what I've read is going to be the increase that's coming in the new program. So think of that as the, I mean, again, we'll wait and see, but I think of that as the 2026 number if you're trying to reconcile. But I thought it's 1901. Why are they saying 1940? Because they're anticipating what it's going to be, I think. But ADAP clients will receive a maximum monthly allowance of $1,740. Now, who said that? Somebody said that. It's the same number. So I don't know. Do they sit around a table and go, I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? Oh, let's take the Canada Disability Benefit number and knock it down. Let's do $200. I don't know. Again, the cynic in me says, like, what's the rhyme or reason? Other than they go, well, this maybe lines us up with other provinces. They may have studied other programs in Canada and said this is more in line, maybe with the view of saying we want to create a new system, not only that is confusing and is the subject of a hand grenade, but we want it to be lower so less people move to Alberta because we can't afford people moving here, I think is what they're saying around the caucus table, but I'm guessing. Now, the one thing while we're on this slide, let me get through this particular slide, number 25. ADAP clients will have the same health benefits as AISH, so that's good, right? They're not going to have a two-tiered system for the health benefits. It's the same health benefits. And what they have said is no matter how much money you make, you will always retain the health benefits. So they haven't always said that. So to their credit, that might actually be an improvement, right? Because there was always a risk that if you make too much money under AISH, now, well, you're not that disabled, you're earning too much, so you're off AISH. And then you would lose the health benefits. That was the big risk, right? So if they're going, well, no, that's a reason why somebody may not work, because they would get clawed back and then get off of AISH, this might actually be an improvement, that guaranteed health benefits. So my guess is they're going to try to do it for fewer people because they see the burgeoning the burgeoning number of people in this area. And they also say we're going to do personal benefits, and that could be worth something. So I have it on the slide there. I don't think it's a ton of money. There's a maximum amount, I think, of $5,000 or something on it. But there could be a few $100s a month of benefit for these personal benefits they speak to. So and we'll see in a minute, we'll get to that slide later, about increased ability to work under ADAP. So you could earn a little bit more under ADAP. But these are going to be, the two-tiered system is that it's $200 less in 2026 for ADAP versus AISH. So if you have the ability to work and you don't qualify for AISH because you can work, you're going to get $200 less starting July 1st of 2026. Okay? They do have some transition provisions in there as well. But as a general rule, if there's clawbacks, I mean, if we're going macro here, I think there's just going to be less money coming to our children, and that's going to place more obligation or more burden, financial burden on the parents to still provide for children, right? Because guess what? If their needs are here and the government is providing support there, guess who's making the difference, right? It's us. It's not falling on anybody else. So we have to be mindful of that in our planning, that it could be there. Okay, does that help answer the question here in terms of what the numbers are? And I think I was here. Any other questions while we're pausing? Okay, still go through all this stuff. Then there's this medical review panel, right, which they say is going to be made up of medical practitioners. This is new, doesn't exist. This is going to be a new panel that figures all this out about who can work and who cannot work. And they're using this panel to determine eligibility for AISH. Now, if I compare and contrast, that's now a little different, right, than the current system, which is it goes to an AISH worker, or there's maybe, you put in your application and somebody reviews it and it comes back, but it's not a board, right? It's not a panel. This is an adjudication process. So I think it feels and it sounds like an enhanced program for what currently exists in terms of evaluating the medical evidence that is there. So that they have stated the panel will include doctors and other medical professionals. Again, I guess we can query where are these people going to come from that have the time for this if they can't even take them 3 months to fill out a form. But I mean, presumably they have a plan. So if you're awaiting a decision to get onto AISH and get the enhanced $200, they'll be placed in the ADAP program in the interim. If approved for AISH, clients will receive a retroactive payment to account for the difference in benefits from the date they started ADAP. So if it's going to take a while, which presumably it's going to, then there might be some benefit of if you win, if you get on AISH, then you get that $200 for the number of months that it takes to figure all this stuff out. So that's there, but it may also create a bit of a cash flow crunch, right? If the kid has $200 less, guess who they're going to? Mom, Dad, I need more money, right? Or you're enhancing the contributions personally that you're contributing with regard to that. So applicants denied for AISH, but by the medical review panel will be approved for ADAP if all of their eligibility requirements are met. I guess that gets back to the point of everybody gets switched over to ADAP. You've got to prove you permanently can't work, and then you're on AISH. But if that is not successful by this medical review panel, then you get on ADAP. I mean, again, the amount of work involved with this, here's my fear, is we're going to have a lot of parents who are just completely overwhelmed. And they're just going to go, it's not worth the effort. And I have a hunch the government's banking on that, right? And there's going to be a lot of people, we're going to save a lot of money by doing this because people aren't going to fight. I mean, we see it certainly in the current system with the disability tax credit. They're going to go, I don't even know where to start. I don't know what to do, and I can't even begin to process that stuff, right? I mean, that's a little bit of what we saw happening with our clients when we were envisaging disability advocates. Going, well, we need to help people in those situations. And I think there's going to be a lot of people in that scenario, and the fear is they go, it sucks, but it's just not worth the $200 a month to fight, right? And what's it going to cost you to get the $200 a month in terms of medical reports and your time and effort and all the rest of it? All right. And then appeal process. This is where I think there is certainly some significant issues that I'm going to have. I'm not going to get into principles of administrative law, but there's a body of law that says when a government body sets up a process, it has to be fair. And if it's not, there's a review by the court. And there's a sort of legal principle called principles of natural justice, right? That there has to be a fairness about how the government conducts its business. It can't be arbitrary or capricious. If not, it could be reviewable by the court and then could be overturned with regard to that. Here's a kicker. Decisions by the AISH Medical Review Panel to deny eligibility for the AISH program will be final and not subject to appeal. Well, I think you can know what myself as a lawyer thinks of something like that. Going, if we kind of assume they're going to mess it up or they're going to make mistakes, do we not have an opportunity to fix it? Right? Like, now I guess at some point they're going to go, we're going to be overrun with people doing all these appeals and we can't, the system will fall apart. Maybe that's a bit of their policy, but it's, again, very concerning if they're setting up this medical review panel by people hired by the government, so they're on the payroll of the government. Are they likely going to be are they influenced? And if they make a decision, you're stuck with it. Well, how's that fair? How is that but I'm assuming, I'm hoping, and again, referencing Danielle Smith, I hope you got a legal opinion that this is all going to fly and it's going to pass, because there could be some challenges here. This does not seem fair at all. But it is what it is. So I'm here to say, that's why I feel like I'm sort of the bearer of bad news and, it's like nothing positive. I'm trying to stay balanced on it. But this is concerning. And I think this is an area potentially to advocate, going, we need some input on this, right? Are they going to really understand your kid and the kid's ability to work? I hope they will, but are they going to listen? And if they don't, you're stuck. That doesn't seem fair. So decisions by the disability assistance adjudicator, another role, to not refer an application to the AISH medical review panel can be appealed to the new ADAP medical appeal panel. Yet another group. So we've got a medical review board. We've got an adjudicator, disability assistance adjudicator, and we have an ADAP medical appeal panel. Oh my goodness. This sounds complicated, right? I'm trying to put the flow chart together and figure it out, but this is from their this is what they plan to do. I want to see the details, and obviously it'll be, how does it actually roll out in July? But there is, if the adjudicator is, say somebody's not eligible for ADAP, that can be appealed, but not the decision of the AISH medical review panel. So stay tuned. But there is kind of an appeal process that's in place. And they did actually, they were asking for input by September the 12th about all these topics. Well, give us feedback and input as to what will work or what's not going to work, right? But again, the cynic in me goes, okay, in summer holidays, people are trying to enjoy their summers, and then you say you got to fill out forms, and you got to understand all this stuff, and a very short time frame. So I don't know how much feedback they got or if they're taking it into account, but hopefully they did. But I think that doesn't mean you don't continue to lobby and you don't continue to advocate for some changes on that. We talked about the benefit amount. So employment income. What they have said so far, they haven't given a lot of details, but what they have said is AISH, the fully exempt amount, remember in the other slide I put up to say it's 1,072, again, single person, it's now 350. So what they're saying is that, which I guess sort of makes sense if they're saying, well, if that person can't work, well, then they're not likely to be able to work because they permanently can't work through this adjudication process, right? And so the amount of money they can make under AISH is even less. There's less incentive to work under AISH. So that's the amount there. And then for ADAP, it's the same 350 is fully exempt, and the other amounts are gradually reducing at increasing levels until the full deduction of 45,000. So that's what they said is 45,000 or 50 if it's a dependent, that you can earn up that, but probably some sort of sliding scale, but they haven't told us what those numbers are. So what I take it is AISH permanently can't work. You can make up to 350, but they're not, I guess, sensing that that's even going to happen, so it's a very small amount. It's down from the 1,072, but going back to the amount on ADAP, it's not the 1,072, it's also 350, and they've worked through some examples to say, well, if somebody makes this much money, then they can keep this much. So I guess we'll have to see what the details are, and in fact, maybe we can crunch the numbers and look at it as applies to our kids, our family members, and be able to say, well, maybe they can work a little bit more. And then we get back to what Annie had talked about which is, they have said we are going to really support the disabled community and provide these people to help with all this stuff, right? In terms of going through that. So again, we have to take them at their word. They're going to try to make this happen. So there's some transitional provisions. We'll just maybe leave it at there, but some dates up there that are relevant. Acknowledging that they're saying by January 1st of 2028, everybody's going to be transitioned. So they're giving themselves a year and a half to do this whole transitioning thing, figuring out from AISH to ADAP, maybe back, maybe not, right? That whole process, they're saying, well, we expect that all to be done and this will all be finished by January 1st of 2028 as we go through it.
One of the things, I'm not sure if it was on one of the slides, was they have said that until December of 2027, that they're saying we know it's going to be a transition period and they are going to keep somebody, like everybody on the 1901 until that period of time. At least that's what it sounds like it's going to be. Again, we'll see sort of when we see the details. But you just want to know that though it's going to go down to 1740 at first, it's not going to be that. What I worry about a little bit, if somebody's working at all, then are they going to continue with that? And I want to see the details before we know for sure what's going to happen with that.
Before I get into sort of other planning tips, or just as we're wrapping up here, we've got another 12 minutes left in the programs, although we can remain afterwards to answer any particular questions, and our contact information is available there as well. But let's fire any other questions. This is kind of what we know so far. We're hoping to gather more information and push it out on there. We'll certainly let FAIM know of any other efforts. We are, we've been struggling with what do we do with this, right? You know, as a firm, obviously as parents, so, you know, we're in this business and this is affecting all our clients. So we are going to be launching launching a podcast where we try to get into a bunch of details of all this stuff, and as information comes out. So hopefully there's a source of good information that can come out. So we'll keep the FAIM office informed of that and can circulate it on that. So stay tuned, because I think there's lots of details. And as we learn more in the fall and into the beginning of 2026, we're going to be diving into these details and trying to do a podcast to get some information out there. Questions, thoughts, or just reactions? Actually, I shouldn't say questions, because we've had some really good comments on this as well. So you might have a comment, and that's okay too. No, I just pointed at her saying that was a compliment to your comment.
Well, I just work with a lot of outreach people, and they aren't going to qualify for the tax, they haven't qualified, so then they can't get an RDSP, they don't get the $200, but they don't get clawed back.
Right. Yeah, so the comment was, in terms of dealing with a certain client, a certain segment of the population is not going to qualify for these various programs. I think that's, if they go through and they don't qualify, then there would be no clawback, presuming that if you've shown your due diligence and you say, well, they tried and they got rejected, that.
So I have one particular person that we have to send in a quote to AISH, and they will pay for the doctors to fill out the forms that they're not going to qualify. So it makes.
Yeah, the comment for the online audience was that in terms of helping to go through that program, I guess sort of referencing the Canada Disability Benefit Program, that there's a cost for the doctors, and they're having to get quotes and then submit that to the AISH department to try to get AISH to pay for all this stuff. I just shake my head and say, I go back to my point, take the 185 million and divide by 77,000, and you know, that would be money better spent. But yeah, it's frustrating, right? Because there's a whole lot of work to go through that. You know, thanks for sharing that experience. There was a hand here. So wait a minute, was it there? Yes, there and then there.
Is this going to affect PDD funding at all?
Okay,
or
so
is that going to change with this?
To the best, so the question is this going to affect PDD funding? Good question. I have not heard anything or read anything to suggest that it will. With regard to that, have you heard anything
Yeah,
on PDD?
no.
So, I mean, again, assuming that this is focused, this is their revamp, their reform of the AISH program, right? And creating this new two-tiered system, AISH and ADAP. So, as far as we know, the rules stay the same on PDD.
Okay, because if someone's funded for PDD and aren't able to work and they're receiving AISH, and then someone is now able to work, and their PDD funding doesn't change for them to receive employment services.
Okay, so I think the question was, if somebody's on PDD and getting support, but their funding doesn't change, but they're determined through the medical review panel that they can work, where's the money going to come from, or how's it going to be that they can get support to be able to work? Because they can't do it right now, and PDD's not going to fund it, right? So I think it goes back to the comment that Annie had made in response to a question, which is the government is allocating a bunch of resources to go hire people and provide that support. So that they've said they're going to do that, so that's as much as we know. So I think the answer to your question, which is a really good one, would be the funding for the job supports is going to come from the ADAP, the AISH/ADAP program, not the PDD program. So hopefully that funding stays as it is. And as we know, PDD is a completely different test. It's a different criteria. It's based on certainly establishing the disability, and it deals with IQ and having to establish their cognitive ability, which is different than AISH, which is their ability to work, which is different than disability tax credit, which is markedly restricted in daily activities. Now you know why Annie's not been without work since 2009, right? Because it's all very confusing, and that's her job to figure all that stuff out. Okay, sorry, here.
I don't have a question, and I do have a comment.
Comments are welcome.
Okay.
We've established, yes, we've established that comments are welcome.
You can pay me later, but we couldn't be thankful enough that we have Annie and Gordon in our life. And it was so difficult and so challenging on many levels to just try and navigate RDSP, disability tax, everything. And Annie was able to do all her magic, and things that we've been denied for, Annie was able to pull off. But so many things that we didn't think about was that we're older parents. What happens to our child if something happens to us? And so we ended up having to do courts and guardianships and who's going to look after the finances of your child and so on. And then it became so much more where then on Gordon's end of it, realizing that we need a will, and having had bad will experiences, we needed to make sure that the wording was right, that everything was properly in place, that whatever happens to us, that our children are completely looked after and that the wording is done right. So they're great, they're amazing. It was worth every penny, and Annie knows that we'll be calling when this ADAP thing comes out. And that, we couldn't have done any of this without them. And if there's ever a question or a problem, the government phones us, sends a letter, whatever, I just phone Annie and she takes my call and lets me know where we're at with that.
Well, I don't think I could be as eloquent to state that or to repeat it, but thank you. In the legal business, a lot of people just sort of complain and just we're in the arguing business, and there's more probably seemingly negative feedback. So I just want to say a sincere thank you for those kind words. Whether they're said or not, that's the reason we get up and do our job every day. So thank you for that. And for the online audience, if you didn't hear, just some complimentary words to Annie and to our team. So in terms of some of the work we do, obviously, all this affects us. I'm worried sick about how this is going to affect our kids, as I'm sure everybody is. So, we take every opportunity to talk to groups like this, and we'll continue to advocate as long as we have breath to help in the system and be that as a focus. So maybe the segue from those comments about interacting with, for our DSPs and guardianship and trusteeship and all the rest of it is maybe as we get close to the 8:30 timeframe. I thought it'd be a bit remiss if I, again, this is not upselling or anything like that, but just candidly, if there's things you need to think about, these are the things you should be talking to your lawyer about, which is like the estate planning. You need to have a properly drafted will. You need proper trust planning. We learned that trusts are exempt. We need to make sure those are going to be in there. There's a lot of consideration for who should be the executors of your estate, who's going to be the trustees of these trusts that we're setting up that will remain, an exempt asset under AISH and ADAP. Registered Disability Savings Plan, what's the plan for all that? We don't set them up, that's, a financial person does that, but we help organize it. The guardianship, trusteeship, and other support. So while we're looking at a slice of sort of how this is going to impact, because it's timely and it's new information, it's a good opportunity to take a look at other things as well, and make sure those are in place. As the gentleman over here had commented, that, okay, it took a while, but you got in place the guardianship and trusteeship right to put that, so you would have the legal standing for your adult child to be his decision maker, right? And that's important to have that in place, to have there. The last thing I guess I'll say with regard to, I guess that last point is more and more this whole topic really emphasizes for me the passing on of knowledge. And I think more and more as parents, if we're, as we age, you can tell I'm of a certain vintage, the gray hair belies that, that you begin to think about, what if you're not here, right? Whether it's in mind or in body, if you become disabled or you pass away. And for those that are stepping in, are they going to know everything that needs to be known about these rules? Now, that's where the hope is that Vanderbilt Law and Disability Advocates continues beyond our working career, so we can continue to serve this community. But it really does become, on a practical basis, super important to, have that letter of wishes or document, well, this is what you need to know. Would the other siblings of your disabled child know what steps to take, and who's the doctor, and where's the disability tax credit form, and what medication is he on, and what supports does he need, and where's the financial planner, where's the accountant, and like all that. You've got that all between your ears, and you live it every day. There's a wealth of knowledge there. Do what needs to be done. There's not a hard and fast rule, but pass on that knowledge in some manner. Look at ways in which you can document that, or sit down and have conversations with the people that need to know, to say, you got to understand this stuff, right? You got to know how to navigate these waters like you're learning. The people who step in your shoes are going to have to figure this out as well. So I think there's a heightened importance for passing on that knowledge, and I think ongoing work for groups like FAIM, right, to continue to do education and advocacy to help along the way, and we're delighted to have been invited to be part of that in one small way, and welcome an opportunity to come back in the future, because obviously, times are a-changing, and there's more to be learned here, but hopefully this is a good primer on what to expect and what some of the issues are, and we'll continue to try to roll out information and stay informed. So with that, I think we can certainly answer any other questions, but also we wanted, again, if there's something you just need a quick conversation or just a chat after today as a continuation of this free seminar, then do reach out to us, and we'll try to be of assistance where we can. So we'll turn it back to Jerry at this point. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Gordon and Annie, for your presentation. A couple things stood out. One thing was early on you said about that the gateway, the disability tax credit, and it made me wonder if all families know that. And so I was thinking we would sort of, have our intake people sort of ask that question. Do you know about the disability tax credit? And because I didn't really know that before, that it was such a gateway. So The second thing is these times are changing. And, this is a big, ADAP is a big topic. We don't have all the information. I was at a government presentation a couple weeks ago where they were going through the different sort of ramifications of ADAP, and people were very upset with it. And so a lot of it's because we don't know what the rules are going to be. And so I will make a commitment to certainly have you guys back, if you would, in some form. But I did the counter. There's 27 family members here. We support 183 people, and so I congratulate and say good for you guys for coming to gather this information. But there's a lot more people that need to know this information, and so. We will work together to share as much information as we can. If you're talking to other parents, please share that as well, and we'll work through that. So, on behalf of all of us here, thank you very much. So we have the room till 9 o'clock. And so if you want to stay and have a couple questions, if that's okay for you guys.
Absolutely.
If I can follow up with what you just said about letting other people know that, or parents that have children, but I would say that every single one of us, if we could also let other people who don't have people with disabilities, I get the feeling of the government making us feel like our children are less than, and that they are trying to take advantage in some way. And I think if the government is saying those things, then people are going to start believing that again, which was kind of what it was when I first started doing this work. So I think the more people who don't know that much about disability but really understand what the government is doing, I think they also need to be the ones that are pushing on the government to change this, because that's not who we are as Canadians, in my view, and that other people need to know, because I think they would be as appalled if they understood more. So the more you talk to people in your life, I think it may make a difference. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.